Thank you very much, Dr. Rakeshnie. That was fascinating, and I wish you all the best, much great success in pushing this initiative. This is the way to go. I'm not quite sure how you're going to get there, but it is certainly the way to go. We've got some questions in the Q&A box. And if anyone wants to speak and ask a question, please put up your virtual hand. You will see at the bottom of your screen there is a little hand and it says raise hand. And that is where you raise your hand and then we will allow you to speak. But let's first go to the Q&A. Gwen Foster says, how are market access and traceability addressed in the research? I'm thinking of, for example, coding of locations and development of ground level capabilities and infotech infrastructure and skills. Would you like to take that question, Rakeshnie or Maneshri? How would you like to do this?
Maneshri?
Thanks, thanks very much, Rakeshnie. Good afternoon to all the colleagues on the call, and thank you very much to Dr. Rakeshnie for that excellent presentation. I think, and you have really promoted us so well. We are really excited at the developments and how far we've come by simply putting a vision on this. With the support of the department, of course. Just on the first question on market access and traceability, for us, a key question, even before we get to what market access, it's you need to start at the question of what is the real opportunity, and that relates to market access, but it also relates to what is the technology available? What is the current status quo? What is the value chain looking like in terms of the commodity you want to invest in? And so generally, and it's very critical, the points you've raised, because you need to know who you're working with. You need to have a community or a set of smallholder farmers that you have in mind in this particular value chain, over and above all of the other needs in terms of getting that technology off the ground. So we do this continuously in all our value chain development projects, including agro-processing. It's about, we call it evidence-based value chain mapping, understanding who, what, how, why, before you invest in an innovation. And that is very linked to our policy in terms of the district development model. So we actually look at the GIS, the locations of where these farmers are, etc. And I think it's now also about, if you want to intervene and if you want to make a difference, it needs to be localized. You have to have the right people in mind. You have to understand also the social context. And this work is complemented by other workers, such as the Center of Excellence for Food Security, where they have been starting to look at living labs. What is the level of food security of these populations, etc. So critical that you have a mix of which farmers you want to develop, have an idea of their locations. If it's food and nutrition intervention, what exactly is the status and what is the level of access to food, etc. So these are some things that the government is taking forward in terms of the district development model. And for every project we are mapping, we are looking at the location, etc. So we are happy to share more information on some of the projects that we have, for example, in developing the Marula value chain, the sorghum value chain, the canola value chain, which is now also being put on the map as an area that has a lot of untapped opportunity in terms of canola oil processing as well. And we're doing some adaptability trials in the Eastern Cape. I think I'll stop there on that question. Unless there's a follow-up, I'm happy to provide more information.
Okay, thank you very much, Maneshri. Then there's a question from Hetty Schoenfeld. Why do you want to revitalize the sugar industry? We have sugar reduction legislation, rather diversified to plant nutritious crops, such as in Mauritius.
Yes, the sugar industry actually is an employment sector for a huge number of uneducated, labor-intensive people. And if we kill that industry, we then, because of the legislation on sugar reduction in our food, it then creates a problem in terms of job security. And that is what the economic recovery and reconstruction plan is. So there is a sugar master plan that's on the table for us to consider. It is about diversifying the sugar applications and the industries it can benefit. But we are not taking that off the table fully. I love sugar, so I love my desserts. I love my cool drinks. So, how often are we going to then take sugar out of the ingredient and put artificial ingredients into, as an example, sweets, which child is not having sweets as a reward system for young kids. So there's other ways of which we have to look at it, because we can't kill jobs. And we can't look at it just merely from a scientific lens. We have to look at it at a whole industry that needs to be, yes, diversified, but also how do we retain jobs in this key sector? Manesha, you can perhaps speak more at length on the master plan, if you can.
Thanks. I was recently at the United Nations International Day of Rural Women, and I think Wikona spoke there about the number of farmers. I think there's 23,000 farmers in the sugar industry, of which 48% are women. And so definitely a huge impact. And then I want to agree with Rakeshnie in terms of the jobs. I also, and personally, if I think about food and nutrition security, I think we must not exclude the fact that as they diversify to other crops, perhaps the issue of nutrition security and starting to look at also planting nutritious crops alongside with the sugarcane might not be such a bad idea. So I think it's something that should be explored with the industry, because these women who work on the farm, they actually are not part of the enterprise. And milling is, of course, there's only 7 companies, although it is, of course, and I think that's where it stems from, the support for jobs, because it's also a $20 billion industry. But I think there's a lot of untapped opportunity. And that is with a lot of the agriculture that we're looking at and we have in front of us. And we must try to give farmers the best of all the solutions that would be available to them, but it needs to come with support and money. Thanks.
Right. Right, that's a very interesting one, if I can chip in there. Because we know that the kind of health problems associated with sugar, but the problem, it's similar to other products, I suppose, like alcohol and tobacco. Do you ban them because they're bad for you? Or do you say people are, it's the people's own choice, and also, can you allow them as a nanny state to have their occasional treat? It doesn't seem to be a very sensible policy from government to say, let's curtail or take measures that limit the industry and stunt growth in the industry. There's something else going on there. We know that during COVID, alcohol was banned to some extent, and cigarettes were banned to a large extent, and yet they are legal again. These are not absolutes. You can't ban sugar on a permanent and wholesale basis. So I'm wondering about the plans. Are there plans for to push export of sugar? because certainly, you know, our sugar production is not consumed only locally. And then also sugar bagasse, you know, some biofuel, the contribution of the sugar industry to biofuel.
Perhaps allow me to speak on that. I think we have about South Africa's export market on raw sugar. If I remember the numbers, from 2022 was just in excess of 300 million US dollars. So we still do export a significant amount of it. Yes, the legislation is it's always responsive to the way in which the disease market and disease progression transpires, largely around diabetes. But also, as I've said, because of the access to food, the challenge is that we have a carbohydrate-rich thing in carbohydrate-rich diet in the country because of our poverty margins, right? And as you saw in the ShopRite slide, a lot of our food is actually coming through from PAP. Right. So what are the underlying conditions? Is it because of our increase in consumption of sugar, or is it because we have a carbohydrate-rich diet? These are questions. It's the same as an example links itself to the way in which we look at cocoa farming. How many kids that work on those cocoa plants actually have access to chocolates? Yeah. So there's a number of things that we need to start considering in this space. I just tried to Google some of those numbers, and we still seem to have a very viable industry. It's just the processing plants that, and with legislation, we need to look at this. I don't know if anyone knows the South African Sugar Experimental Station in KZN. And that is actually done some significant work in that regard in terms of the way the way in which we are trying to revitalize some of the GMOs to increase the capability of sugar retention in the cellulose, in the vacuoles of the sugar plant itself. So there's a number of things we can push to and we can push out of, but as Maneshri quoted the statistics, it's actually quite it's an industry in distress, as we call it, and it's up to government to help save that.
And about biofuel,
Oh, yes, there is a whole plan. Sorry about the biofuels one. Yes, we actually are supporting biofuels under the Renewable Energy Master Plan, the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan, that is being led by DMRE, which is now the Department of Energy and Electricity. And what we are seeing is that the biomass that is required to even fuel an aircraft is significant. So the yield that is needed actually leaves us in a space we have to relook at the techno-economics therein. So the viability of sugarcane being, as an example, a source for biofuel at this stage is currently still being looked at the techno-economics level.
Right. So we'll just watch the space.
Watch the space.
Yes. Maneshri, do you have something to add to that?
Not at this stage, sorry. I'm not working on the biofuel space. I think the techno-economic will direct the way. I think there are some countries in Africa who have really, like Ghana, started to look at this. We're just not 100% sure if that's going to work for us. And I think it's also about prioritizing. We tend to try and do everything. I think very often, even in this program, the ABIPP program, our finance guys criticized us and said, why don't you focus on a few things? Because the resources are so limited. But I think it's a valid point, because if we are so expansive and we have this knowledge base and capacity to do so many things, But I think it's also time that we start to be a little bit selfish to say, let's focus on this and make it work. I mean, Ethiopia has a university for aviation, and they're very successful because they have that. So it's about prioritizing, and I think we can learn from that.
Gwen Foster asks, how could we propose a project for research? Would you be open to Gwen Foster communicating with the both of you?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Ineshri has all the money.
Okay, great. She's the person to talk to.
We perhaps to add, we do run calls for ABIPP, perhaps not as often as we'd like to, depending on resource availability. But so hopefully we would be running one in the next year. I think not in this financial year, not right now, but there would be. But we also run strategic projects because we are a support function to government departments. And we, in our steering committee, we do have line function departments who also sit there. So they also bring strategic projects where they have an interest. It's the same with industry. If industry is willing to put a certain amount of co-funding on the table, they are allowed to also table a strategic project. But of course, there needs to be a conversation around it, and there needs to be support also from government as well.
Right. Thank you.
It all depends on the targets that you can bring.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Mineshri, I don't think I introduced you properly. Everyone, as you can see, she is Dr. Jagmohan Naidu, and she is from the department. What is your position there, Mineshri?
I am the director for agricultural biotechnology, but also the lead on the agri portfolio for the agri bioeconomy and also now for the decadal plan. So, yeah, thanks.
For the bioeconomy, right? Okay, just so I get it right. Apologies for
Agri
that.
bioeconomy, agri bioeconomy. My boss is Mr. Ben Durham, who is responsible for the bioeconomy overall, including
Okay.
health, agriculture, industry, and environment in IKS.
Okay, fantastic. Would the two of you be willing to share your email addresses?
Yes, definitely. I can pop it on the chat if.
Yes, please. That would be great. Or yeah, Mankwe can also do so.
I think Mankwe, I can't type there to everybody. Yes.
Okay. Yes, I think Mankwe will have to do that. Philip Foyun asks, what research in regenerative farming is being done?
I can maybe, Rakeshnie, unless you want to take that one, I can talk to it. So regenerative farming is it is a new buzzword. And you know, a lot of these sort of terminology sort of come, and it's in the one instance it's conservation agriculture, it's regenerative farming, but I think and we don't have a specific focus or project for regenerative agriculture per se, but the notion of doing more with less, of using less pesticides, ensuring that there's proper input planning, and the use of precision agriculture, for example, in terms of water use efficiency, etc. These contribute to the body of knowledge in terms of regenerative farming. So I think in terms of the new STI roadmap that we are going to be developing, it will certainly be something that will be part of the conversation. And there may well be specific programs on regenerative agriculture. But I think the principles in terms of what it would like to achieve is definitely part and parcel of the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
I think just to add, you know, it's just another term for sustainable farming. That's basically what we're going to call it.
Yes.
And we're just looking at the economics therein. And I did speak of reducing our carbon footprint as we do modernize the sector. So it's an underpinning criteria across all the initiatives outlined in ABIPP. So you call it regenerative, and we're calling it sustainable farming practices. And that's something that we will be, we continue to fund. In terms of the funding that was spoken of, this year's or financial year's allocation has been committed. Does not mean that we will not have money for the next financial year. It's just that we will make sure that the call goes out earlier. Maneshri will also guide in terms of when that call will go out, and it will largely be driven by either the ARC, the Agricultural Research Council, or the Technology Innovation Agency, who are strategic partners in driving the ABIPP imperatives and the calls on our behalf. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, that brings us to the next question, which is, what is the status of the Agricultural Research Council?
Well, gather we spoke of that. But yes, ARC is our key implementing partner. We've just had a planning meeting a week or so ago, Maneshri. 2 Fridays ago. And the conversation is around aligning our work, largely because they are also fall under Department of Land Reform, and we need them obviously on board to deliver the district development model. So they are our key partners. And on the innovation end and accessing to upscaling of technologies and farmers, that's where we bring on board TIA as well.
Okay. And do you
Thanks, Rakeshnie. I would, oh, sorry, apologies.
go ahead, Maneshri.
No, just to say that they are, of course, a key implementing partner in many of our projects as well. So, for example, the Cassava Value Chain Development Project, they are a lead together with the Marketing Council, as well as quite a number of other projects and programs. They are also a strategic partner in the Biosecurity Hub and part of the steering committee as well. Because it's large in part of their portfolio in terms of the role they play in biosecurity, but also in certification, in standards, and dealing with the quality assurance issues in relation to the needs of the Department of Agriculture.
Okay. And is that the major way in which you interact with the Department of Agriculture, or is there some way in which you can work with the Department of Agriculture or the provincial departments?
I think perhaps I'd advise there are interdepartmental committee meetings. And we have them not just for agriculture, we also have them for energy, and we have them for health, across clusters. And with the Government of National Unity, it's a priority for us to have a whole of government approach.
Okay, fantastic. Good to hear. Not easy, but very good to hear. Right, then Gwen Foster also asks, is the team responsible or accountable for implementation?
I think my last slide spoke to the team.
Okay.
Yes. And I think Maneshri's email is on that, and she's the director, and there's a whole team responsible for ABIPP.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps I can add, because I think there is perhaps not an understanding of how we also operate. There is an ABIPP steering committee that is appointed by the Director General of the DSTI, and that oversees all of projects, approvals, oversight, etc. But that is guided through a process by the DSI in terms of the strategic relation we have with our implementing partner, with the Technology Innovation Agency. So it's a very streamlined way in which we approach it. We would advise on priorities that have been approved with other stakeholders through normal consultative processes. The ABIPP program is then implemented by the Technology Innovation Agency, supported by both the steering committee and a project management unit. And I think you saw some of the colleagues from the project management unit. Not many, I'm finding that not many colleagues are aware of how it all comes together. So I thought it was just worth mentioning. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Maneshri. It's obviously quite a complex environment in which to work, because you have multiple stakeholders and you have to make sure that they are all included and consulted. Jonas von Fitzter says, thank you very much for the work you're doing. I was wondering how you ensure that the training of farmers and communities have longer term effects and skills do not get lost again.
So there is a very deliberate attempt in our portfolio to look at support for small-scale farmers. Because if our mandate is about supporting transformation, inclusivity, and in particular, we support the Department of Agriculture's goals in terms of rural economic development. Hence, considerations in terms of farmer training, farmer support are in consultation with large industry where there is mentorship and training. In developing new technologies for particular areas, there is support both from, for example, in the Grain SA partnership, from both the large farmer and the farmer development program. So a lot of some of our best outcomes have been achieved through collaboration with farmer development programs, associations, where there has been that lead and support from the industry to support these farmers with the skills, etc. And because it is training, you know, on a moving train, there is that translation and there is support. So we've had with the soybean industry and through co-funding from the oil, co-funded projects with the Oil and Protein Seeds Development Trust, we also monitor how farmers graduate through the support both for production and processing to become more commercialized. So they in terms of increasing the number of hectares of soybean they produce, while at the same time on farm the women have support to process soybean into soy milk, soy snacks, soy cow on farm on small processes. So it's about changing the mindset. And I think when ABIPP came in, it was changing the way we fund innovation in agriculture such that it's much more targeted at not only the skills that we develop in terms of the science-based developing the innovations, but the other skills. And Dr. Rakeshnie talked about the support we provide to technicians. And it's actually taking unemployed graduates and giving them on-the-job training. And through within this project, they get appointed through by science councils, by universities, etc. And along the way, they also get permanent employment. So it's about changing the way we as the DSI also fund skills. So it's about all skills, and all skills are important, but making it fit for purpose such that there is that impact. And I think that's the beauty of the ABIPP program.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think I will add there, you know, the number of commercial farmers we have is just under 50,000 in the country. The number of small scale farmers, Manisha helped me, is over 2 million.
Yeah.
So
it's under 2 million. It's about up to 700,000, but it could be more.
Yes, because we're also looking at the subsistence farmers that sell on the streets.
Yeah.
That when you look at the informal, not just the formal sector, then you're going up to around 2 million. So that type of work is intensive. And I gather these are some of the strategic imperatives outlined in the Government of National Unity, because we now have to pull together to make sure that our resources are consolidated. And I gather that was my last slide. It's a whole of government and a whole of society approach. Everyone needs to come on board, because what sits in a lab shouldn't stay in a lab. We need to translate them into solutions and drive them home. And this is where we're also asking municipalities and districts to also come on board and also be receptive, because sometimes our barriers are getting to communities. The protocols, the ability to accept this and also think that, oh, we're here to capitalize on indigenous land, or we're using it for our own gains. Meanwhile, it's not. And this is where public awareness and outreach is also important, so that it's not as an it's a fear-based approach when we do enter a community. It's about saying, we are here to help you. And we are all speaking from the One South Africa lens. Those are some of the community challenges we face, just so you know. And getting there is not always the easiest way. And this is why having provincial government on board is also key, a critical partner for us.
There are many questions, and we only have 20 minutes left. I want to give some people from the floor a chance to speak up, but there is one question I just want to take before that. It's from Professor Dave Berger, and he says the map earlier in the presentation showed zero venture capital investment in agri-biotech in Africa. What does ABIPP do to stimulate an enabling regulatory environment for new breeding technologies, such as gene editing?
Yes, this is a legislation problem again. So a lot of the work happens at the research space, in laboratories, in a confined, controlled environment. We are a very conservative country. Our ethics, our behaviors, our social norms, and our cultures is very conservative compared to the aggressive approach from large-scale farmers in the global north. So in terms of that, this is a constant debate, especially on release of GMOs as an example. And this is why it's so important to have everyone on board and this is where our interdepartmental committees play a key role, from agriculture, DTIC, so we can understand the implications and cost of trade, to putting it out there. And of course, there are some of our key projects and products that require significant farming, and of course, looking at gene mapping, gene profile, gene editing. Maneshri, do you want to add in that regard?
Thanks, Rakeshnie. I think you've covered the part about legislation and us having to work with other government departments. And it's true but we are very proactive in terms of supporting the necessary research. And of course, this is an area that's a lot of interest. So I think it will be sort of high on our list of follow through. The one thing I perhaps it's not all doom and gloom for us in South Africa in terms of venture capital. If you look at the latest SAFCA report for 2022, in terms of South Africa itself, agriculture has now crept into the top 5. Agri-tech, investment in agri-tech has crept into the top 5 in terms of venture capital investment in South Africa. That's along with health innovation, etc. And I think it's largely driven by new technology and modernizing agriculture, but largely due, if we look at the Business Innovation Survey, a lot of interest in terms of more precision agriculture. But I think in the long term and in terms of sustainability, there will be a need for us to catch up in terms of these new innovations that really could drive much more impact in terms of climate change, etc. So I think I'm going to stop there. Thanks, Rakeshnie.
Okay. Thank you very much, both of you. P. Lukeli Ulurunju. I'm sorry, I can't say your surname, but please speak up.
No, thank you very much. I would like to really appreciate this presentation by Drs. Rakeshnie and Maneshri. You've touched on a lot of issues, And I want to agree with you, Dr. Maneshri, that maybe prioritizing would be good for us in South Africa or in your department, ABIPP. All the same, you are doing a very good job. You've touched on everything I could think of. And I raised the question on ARCs, the Agricultural Research Councils in South Africa, because these are research councils that have been doing extremely well, because in terms of research, that, concerns agriculture. We have the Small Grains Institute in Bethlehem, where they deal with small grains like wheat. You touched on wheat. And they were not just only working, alone. They work with universities. But I sometimes I wonder how much support they are still getting, because, I mean, some of them were at the point of, going through TIA to release some of their findings, like, for instance, producing the effect of using fungus for treatment of certain crop diseases. We also had the Grain Crops Institute, where sorghum is based, and they did a lot of research. We also had the industrial crops, where they were dealing with oil plants, the oil crop plants, and including what I want to call, not inverted commas, plants that deal with marijuana. Yes. And
Cannabis.
yes. And a lot of good research was going on in these institutions. We also had an institution dealing with horticultural crops, soil and water climate institution, all these ones with extremely good researchers. I don't know how much of the work is still going on, or is the funding has reduced the amount of work, research work, or have the researchers been turned into extension workers instead of doing research? Because the research is very important if we want to talk about productivity. Yes, and there can't be processing when there's no productivity. Productivity is very important. And agro-processing follows, But the important thing for me is how much support, financial support. I know the government is always talking about financial strain, but the support of research is very, very important if we are a country that really wants to compete. Crops like cowpea, which is a very good crop that grows under drought resistance, under drought problems, you have cowpeas that can grow, and small-scale farmers love this crop. They can do it. And there's a lot of research that has been done on it, but the release of the varieties, because this is an introduced, the release of the varieties has taken so long, you begin to wonder whether there's gatekeeping in terms of varietal release for the breeders, or something else is happening. And I really wanted to emphasize the issue of research in agricultural production, all the crops. Our institutes can do the job, and they've been doing it, and they've been doing a good job. But are they properly funded? I know it's not your problem, or it's not your business to fund them. But for me, it's like, can we go back to research? Good research that is done by the Agricultural Research Councils of South Africa, if we want to improve on productivity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that point, ma'am. I really appreciate that. It's an important one. Where are you based? What organization do you belong to?
No, right now I'm based in my house. I've retired.
Okay. Oh, all right.
But I'm not tired, because agriculture is my love.
That's obvious, yes. And you obviously have a lot of knowledge and experience with it. Thank you very much for that point. The various units of, agricultural councils, as you call them, are actually part of the National Agricultural Council. So they are, funded centrally. But it is a very good point that, the funding needs to be there where the need is.
Yes.
And I'm sure that, in other places in government, it is quite difficult to effect that and to have an influence on it. But since it's raised in this on this neutral platform, we can certainly amplify and emphasize what you're saying when we do our write-up and our publicity of the
Please,
forum.
please, because I really don't want researchers to be turned into extension workers.
Yeah.
And South Africa has to solve its number of extension workers versus the number of farmers, because that is the issue. It shouldn't be something that is totally thrown on the Agricultural Research Councils. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Gwen Foster.
Maybe I could also add on that, there's perhaps a follow-up could also be that we bring Dr. Shabalala on board, because he leads the Indigenous Knowledge Systems Initiative.
Can you?
So
Sorry.
he's a colleague of Maneshri. He's also within the bioeconomy unit in the department, and he could talk to you about some of the Ubuntu practices and the virtual incubator and institute that has been established as a governance framework for exactly what has just been articulated. And of course, as an example with the cannabis, there's a presidential cannabis master plan, looking at how we can support this industry as well as create a viable export capability as well. There are a number of other crops we can look at, essential oils as well, but that's Ank's portfolio. And if need be, we can bring him along as well to have a conversation on this platform.
I think we will probably have a follow-up on all these issues at the Indigenous Knowledge Summit, which NSTF is helping the department organize next year.
Can you hear me?
Yes, just a moment, Gwen.
Okay.
So this will happen in April or May next year. It is a big IK summit that is planned in over 3 or 4 days. And certainly these questions will come up again, I'm sure. Thank you very much for that. Gwen Foster, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. It's very good to see what you are doing, and also the fact that you cover numerous disciplines. I'm excited by GNU because it brings together agriculture, environment, science and technology, or communications, information side, as well as certain of the education sides. Picking up on extension services, I think the current ratio is 1 to over 1,000 farmers, which is unsustainable. Picking up on cannabis, that is very much part of my focus and where I would like us to get into step. I won't go into details now. Very briefly, I go back to the early 90s. This is the fourth wave of change if we look at climate. My focus is data. My expectation, frankly, is that South Africa does not have the funding that is required. I was recently overseas in certain discussions. That is part of the plan. A lot of the issues, a lot of the fragmentation goes back to deregulation. So our individual industry associations don't collaborate. However, everything comes together at a farm. And it's one of the reasons why I ask about identification. So that's all part of the history. My focus is on evolving an information services industry for agriculture. We focusing on the youth, that it's time for the elders, and I include myself in that, to pull back from the front line, not to protect what we know. We are not sharing what we know. So every time there's a new government, it's a new set of plans. That is one reason why I'm asking about sustainability and whose accountability it is to implement. We've been through this before, right across the chain. We've got everything we need. I'd like to pick up. I really like what you do, but I just wanted to introduce myself and say where I am coming from. And if we come to ARC, I did ask about Robertson ARC, which is largely dysfunctional and I believe has now been rented out, perhaps leased out. So that is a consideration. I've seen ARC pretty well collapse. I've seen the Department of Agriculture buildings pretty well in some instances collapse. And if we have a look at who is influencing policy and everything else, there is no Department of Agriculture in the Western Cape at local municipal level. There is no Department of Agriculture at district level. And it just doesn't work. Let me put it that way. So very keen with what you're doing. I believe when we come to communities, huge amount of work. I'll send you some stuff so that you can figure for yourself. But I really believe that we have the opportunity. I'm going for what I call agri-ceuticals, because then it's easier to bypass some of the no, you're not allowed to say that. I also am coming through, I'm ambassador for, on the climate side, for a Cambridge program called Democratizing Education, Climate Justice and the Law, or Global Justice and the Law, and it's available. So we have absolutely everything we need at the academic level, and I put yourselves up there as well. I'm coming from ground up because that is where we need the understanding. We don't need degrees and everything else. We need people who understand. We need to break it up. We need to make it digestible. That's where we're coming from, ready to roll. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Gwen Foster. Thank you for your passion. I think that you should take it up with the speakers afterwards. And yes, send them the information you've got. Before we're basically at the end of our time, but I would like to give a chance still to people who want to speak. Hetty Schoenfeld.
Okay, yes, I just want to say about the ARC. Since last year, they actually are getting a very well input. All the money that the Department of Agriculture has not spent is being handed over to the ARC. So it's billions since last year. So it's going so well with the ARC. So
Okay.
I don't know if people know that, but it's really, I mean, I work with a lot of researchers. Rudderport has always been a star, but I mean, they're building new facilities for retired people to come and work there for free in an educational environment. At the ARC Irene, they're reappointing people. Unfortunately, they have lost a lot of capital to the universities. You can read the report, they call it the Flight of the Flamingos, which happened in the early thousands when all the researchers moved out of the ARC to universities. And some areas is really sad, such as the meat science. I mean, we very few meat scientists left in the country, and they are unable to attract meat scientists to the ARC at this stage. But other areas are absolutely blooming. So, and I think that's great news, you know. So I just want to make that point.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Hetty. That really helps. Okay, Manishni and Rakeshnie, would you like to address those questions before you give us a last word of wisdom?
It's always interesting how we, you know, and these platforms are important because it profiles the work that national government is doing. And it demystifies the space where people think things are not happening. Oftentimes, this is the biggest challenge. There are perceptions out there, and we need to have one voice in terms of the work that is being done. And perhaps we as government also don't celebrate or share the work we are doing, whether it's the ARC or whether it's financing or challenges, these things. And, you know, the same thing happens with entities. They go through their ups and downs in their cycles. They get new leadership. They pivoted on that space. And national government's aware of that. How do we reposition the strategies of some of those entities to respond to the evolving needs of not just the people, but also of the global agendas in that regard? So yes, this is a key issue. Yes, nutrition is an important part that we are dealing with food security. And we're also looking at viable industries that we need to support and economies, and being a contributor, an accelerated contributor to the GDP, not just in South Africa, but continentally. So thank you for this opportunity. And I'm sure Maneshri, Beulah, and Tabang, who are on this platform, are also accessible and available via email to engage further on some of these areas. And if we in the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation do not have the requisite purses to support these initiatives, we'll definitely make the necessary referrals where to. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Rakeshnie.
Maybe to add to what Rakeshnie just said before I hand over back to her. Just on the 2 points that the last speaker spoke about, evidence-based decision-making or science-based decision-making and big data and developing knowledge hubs that have validated science-based information to support efficient farming is a priority. It's a science-based information is, well, it's a priority across DSI, but in agriculture, it's about supporting farmers to farm efficiently, to be sustainable, to plan for the future, to develop early warning systems, etc. So this is part and parcel of what we do. And the very last point I just want to say, and I know we're running out of time, is the issue of partnerships. So we rely on industry to also guide and help priority setting, but we also expect all partners, including industry, science councils, universities, to help us maximize the resources available in the system to work together with the knowledge that they have that they can bring. And that's been working beautifully, including with industry. So it's a way of working that is really efficient. And it's about putting the right minds always in the same room. On the One Food project, we will share offline. I saw there was a comment about that, but we do have the project is going really well, and it's also about identifying where are the needs, where are the people who need that information, how can we get it to them. But thanks very much.
Back to you, Rakeshnie. Any last words?
I'm totally fine. Thank you very much. I think if there is an ongoing engagement, or perhaps this can be for the department to also engage NSTF around a number of the key priorities we are chasing under the decadal plan, that's also important. And we are also available to support that, especially on venture capital and access to financing around the SMME fund and some of the work we're doing with venture capitalists and de-risking some of the key projects, because as much as we are pushing them on the upstream end, on the downstream end, we also need to facilitate some of that access to financing. So all of those modalities we could share if these are opened to the department to allow us this access to people and engagements with researchers and the science enterprise in terms of sharing what opportunities exist. We had, as an example, earlier this year, a workshop, and just to look at access to financing as an example. We had entities there, agencies, and it was interesting. Everyone put on the table what they had. And the challenge that we realized is that everyone operates in silos. So basically, if I went to the PIC or the IDC or TIA for funding, I would only have access to that little limited amount of information. But if I needed to upscale some of the technologies, the suite and the purses are actually quite vast. It's just about knowing where to go and how to tap into that.
Yeah.
And then those are usually some of the frameworks. So we need to explore that. Of course, researchers get their funding from the NRF. We won't tap into that, but there are other modalities. And this is where we find the innovation portfolio in the DSTI leading. We are trying to bridge what scientists are doing in terms of accessing bigger markets and de-risking some of their novel innovations in terms of taking it to market and then building the international market for uptake therein. So thank you very much, Ms. Niehaus, for this opportunity. And from the department, we say thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ramoutar-Prieschl and Dr. Jagmohan Naidu. It was fantastic having you both on this Zoom and giving your presentation. You're sharing your extensive knowledge and insights. And yes, knowing that there's such good work going on under the umbrella of the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. Thank you also to our audience. There are still 119 participants in the Zoom. I know that this was a very popular topic, and yes, to come back on what you said, Rakeshnie, I think it would be useful to have a proper 2-day discussion forum sometime in the course of next year or so, where we really unpack some of these things in more detail than we can in a 90-minute session. But this was extraordinarily productive. I thank members of the audience as well who participated in the Q&A and who spoke from the floor as well.